No, actually, it's not the good afternoon, everybody, or morning, as the case may be. We are very pleased to be with you virtually and hope that you are well wherever you are. My name is Gina Rappaport, and I am the photo archivist and the head archivist at the National Anthropological Archives. With me today are Catherine Crow, our reference archivist, and Daisy Njoku, our media archivist. Today's presentation will be an orientation to the NAA and its resources and services. And I'm going to start out with an overview and background of the NAA. Following this, Catherine will discuss conducting research at the NAA, including on-site visiting as well as online access to collections. And Daisy will talk about reproductions, digitization, et cetera, that kind of access. So before I begin, I would like to quickly acknowledge the Piscataway peoples from whose land we're broadcasting today in the Washington, D.C. area. Okay, to jump right in. Normally I would ask you all, raise your hand if you've heard of the NAA or whatever, but I'm just going to assume that some of you have heard of us and some of you maybe have not heard of us. But the National Anthropological Archives is part of the Smithsonian Institution. Where it sits organizationally can be a little bit confusing to understand, so hopefully this chart will make it clearer and not more confusing. At the very bottom, you see...
Gina, I don't think your screen is sharing. We can't see the chart.
Sharing?
No.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Stand by. Share screen. Share. Can you see it now? I'm really sorry about that. Actually, it was this one. So at the bottom here, you can see the archives, National Anthropological Archives and Human Studies Film Archives, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and the collections. So these are all the anthropology collections, and they're housed at the Museum Support Center. So we are part of the Department of Anthropology within the National Museum of Natural History. So that's where we sit organizationally. There are 19 museums in the Smithsonian and 13 archives across the institution. Though we are all under the umbrella of the Smithsonian, each unit may be administratively separate. So this can be very confusing when you want to find out what the Smithsonian has in a certain area, and then you end up having to go to all these different places. So hopefully this makes clear that we are part of the Natural History Museum, and then there are other museums. For example, the National Museum of the American Indian has their own collections and archives, and they are housed in the Cultural Resources Center, which is the building right next door to where we are. And this is just another way of looking at the NAA. So again, we're in the Department of Anthropology in the National Museum of Natural History in the Smithsonian Institution. So organizationally, we sit in the National Museum of Natural History. We are physically located at the Museum Support Center. That is the name of the building that we are in, is the Museum Support Center in Suitland, Maryland. This is about 6 miles southeast of Washington, D.C. It's just outside of D.C. It's very close. And on that same campus is the Cultural Resources Center of the Museum of the American Indian. The National Anthropological Archives collects materials from the 4 fields of anthropology: cultural anthropology, biological anthropology, linguistics, and archaeology. The NAA's mission, and we have our actually new mission statement here, which I will read, The National Anthropological Archive serves the global community by acquiring and preserving records documenting the history of anthropology and world cultures, ensuring that the public can discover, use, and learn from our collections. The NAA is critically aware of the colonial roots of our organization and discipline and strives to expand our understanding of how to meet our responsibilities as stewards of Indigenous heritage our collections document in order to better serve these communities. In terms of the size of our holdings, we're the fourth largest archives within the Smithsonian with over 18,000 feet of material. That includes the papers of over 300 anthropologists, records of over 40 anthropological organizations and major projects such as the River Basin Surveys, the American Anthropological Association, the Society for American Archaeology, and et cetera. We have over 1 million photographs. We have approximately 20,000 works of art with 2 A's, I just noticed, 5,000 sound recordings, and about 8 million feet of motion picture film. The NAA, we consider ourselves the oldest archives in the Smithsonian as we date our founding back to 1879 with the founding of the Bureau of American Ethnology. For those of you that don't know about this little history, during the 1860s and 1870s, a series of government-sponsored geographical surveys of the American West took place. These surveys are generally referred to by the names of the men who led them and included Clarence King, William Wheeler, Ferdinand Hayden, and John Wesley Powell. Though primarily focused on the natural history and resources of the land, the survey personnel encountered many Native peoples, of course. John Wesley Powell led a number of surveys in the late 60s and 70s, that's 1860s and 1870s, his first trip being a trip through the Grand Canyon. And he recognized the impact of Western expansion on Indigenous culture and language. With the backing of Joseph Henry, Secretary of the Smithsonian, he lobbied Congress for funds to establish a Bureau of Ethnology under the auspices of the Smithsonian Institution. So the Bureau of American Ethnology, or BAE, as you will hear me refer it to, as, was part of the Smithsonian Institution. The focus of the BAE was to document the language and culture of the indigenous peoples of North America. However, Powell also consolidated the ethnographic documentation that had already been collected by the Smithsonian, some of it dating to before the founding of the Smithsonian, from such enterprises as the Wilkes Exploring Expedition in the 1830s and 40s. As well as information collected from missionaries and military personnel in the West. So the Smithsonian was founded in the 1840s, but we have material that predates that, although the bulk of material is from the 19th and 20th century in our collections. So that's the BAE, the Bureau of American Ethnology, and they had started to collect manuscript material and create documentation. So they had started their own archives. Meanwhile, the Smithsonian's first museum, called the U.S. National Museum, and which was founded in 1881, also had a division of anthropology. Their focus, however, was more global in scope, and starting in 1903, they also had biological anthropology division. They hired a biological anthropologist, although it wasn't called biological anthropology at the time. I don't know what they called it. So the BAE and the Smithsonian Department of Anthropology remained independent from each other until the 1960s, when the BAE was dissolved and the remaining curators joined the Department of Anthropology. By this time, the U.S. National Museum had divided, resulting in the two museums, the National Museum of Natural History, which housed the Department of Anthropology, and the National Museum of History and Technology, which is now known as the National Museum of American History. The archives of the BAE and Department of Anthropology combined, and in 1968, the archives was formally named the National Anthropological Archives. So we have these two branches of Smithsonian anthropology coming together, and the archives of those two divisions came together and formed the NAA. The Museum Support Center was built in the 1980s, and in 2001, the NAA moved the collections and offices to MSC. And you can see in these pictures the earlier days where housing was not spectacular. And then on the right is our new digs, which has pretty nice storage facilities. The Human Studies Film Archives is now also formally joined with the NAA. While the NAA claims to be the oldest archives in the Smithsonian, the HSFA is the youngest. It began as not only an archives, but also as a maker of anthropological film. So in fact, when they were founded, they were mostly concerned with making anthropological films. They no longer do that. They are now just in archives, but it is the largest collection of ethnographic moving image material in the world. So our ISTs, our largest, we are one of the largest archives in the world devoted exclusively to documenting the history of anthropology in the world's cultures. One of the largest collections in the world of Indigenous North American language documentation. One of the largest collections in the world of photographs relating to Native American peoples, and the largest ethnographic film collection in the world. Just a few of our highlights. So I'm just gonna go through some of the types of things we have. So for example, we have, like I said, the papers of over 300 anthropologists. This is an example of field notes and photographs from the papers of Stanley Ann Dunham, who is pictured here. She is also well known as the mother of Barack Obama, but she was an anthropologist, and we received her papers a few years ago. The largest single collection in the NAA that we have are the papers of John Peabody Harrington, which many of you may be familiar with. There are over 700 shelf feet of papers, recordings, audio recordings, botanical specimens, and photographs relating to numerous communities, particularly in California communities. And Harrington was a BAE ethnologist. Daisy can mention more if you have questions, but most of his papers were microfilmed in the 80s, I think, and 90s. And we more recently had all of the microfilm digitized, so it should all be available online. The photograph collections relating to Indigenous cultures in general and Native American people in particular is pretty unparalleled in the United States, I would say. And a lot of this has to do with the early Western surveys. The photography that was made on those surveys exists now in two places, the National Archives and the National Anthropological Archives. This is due to the fact that John Wesley Powell was also the second director for the US Geological Survey. And so he was director of the US Geological Survey at the same time he was director of the Bureau of American Ethnology. So he separated out all of the photographs depicting people and as separate from the landscape photography, and most of the photographs of individuals or people and more ethnographic photographs came to the Bureau of American Ethnology. So that sort of formed the very early core of the photography collections at the NAA. And the photography of Native American delegates to Washington is one of the strengths of this collection. It is in part due to the fact that the NAA holds the original negatives for all of the delegation photos made at the Smithsonian, as well as other Washington, D.C. photography studios. So if you're interested in photography relating to anyone that came to Washington as a delegate, we hold the most of these photographs. And of course, sound recordings. And this is another area. I'll just point out that Daisy is your go-to person for any audio. If you have questions about audio. But we have obviously many different forms of audio, which include interviews, songs, stories, what have you. The NAA holds thousands of works of art, including, to our knowledge, the largest collection of Plains ledger art anywhere. And these are just a few of my favorite drawings from members of different communities. So that's pretty much brings me to the end of my part of the presentation, but we did want to talk just for a minute about restrictions on access and use, and how we manage those issues in our collections. The bulk of NAA's collections date from the early 19th century to the present, with some older material. Many of these collections contain indigenous knowledge or biological data collected in colonial contexts before current ethical protocols were in place, and sometimes in an extractive or abusive manner. The NAA's collections therefore contain biological, cultural, and psychological observations of living humans and their descendants, which may require special use protocols or restrictions. So while we make every effort to make materials available, we do have restrictions, and we can place restrictions on material. Our determinations are based on a number of Smithsonian policies, but also based on the protocols for Native American archival materials, the Society of American Archivists Code of Ethics, the American Anthropological Association Principles of Professional Responsibility, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So we take this very seriously. And so in addition to things like restrictions for privacy based on personally identifiable information and donor imposed restrictions, cultural restrictions are something that we encounter that we are amenable to. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn it over to Catherine.
Hi, everyone. It says that host has disabled screen sharing.
Oh, Melissa?
Oh, okay, that should work now. Okay. So if anybody can't see anything, let me know, but it should be working. So hi, everybody. I'm Catherine. Some of you I think I have met in the archives. Recognize some of the names in the attendee list. And so before I get into visiting the NAA, I do want to talk a little bit about our current status. So as you probably would have guessed, right now we are closed to the public. We're not open for in-person research appointments at the moment. And so right now we're not scheduling any research visits because given the current state of things, there's not a good way to predict exactly when we are going to be able to reopen. So we're just holding off for now. But as soon as we know, that information will be shared publicly on social media, our website. And so, once we know when we're going to open, we can start scheduling appointments again. But so a lot of things I'm going to talk about in the next couple of minutes apply to sort of our normal operating procedures. And so a lot of this is going to just be the same all the time. Some of it might be a little bit different. We've talked a little bit about how we might change things in order to protect everybody's health when we do reopen, but we haven't finalized any of those plans yet. So some things might be a little different. Our operating hours might be limited, and we probably will have more restrictions on how many people are in the room at a time, that sort of thing, but largely everything's going to be the same. But obviously, when we get to that point, I and the rest of the staff are always available for questions and letting everybody know our new policies. So normally we are open Tuesday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4:30. We schedule research appointments by appointment only. We can't do walk-ins. This is mostly because we are not located in the public museum space. We are in a sort of storage facility for Smithsonian collections. And so based on Smithsonian policies, access to the building is more limited. And so we have to have advance notice for any visitors who aren't Smithsonian employees. So we do have to, know ahead of time who is going to come so that we can fill out paperwork for you. So for research appointments, if you're going to be doing in-depth research, we have an online form that I'll talk about a little bit more in a couple of slides. But if you want to schedule a large group tour, just send us an email and we can work it out. Generally, we suggest at least 1 to 2 weeks advance notice for a research appointment and 1 or 2 months at least for a tour. I think once we do actually open, you might want to extend it a little bit, and obviously it's always best to get on our calendar as early as possible. We have a relatively small research space, and so even during normal times, we do have to put a limit on how many researchers we can have in a day, because physically we can only fit so many people in the room. So we, Gina talked a little bit about this, but we are at the Museum Support Center just south of DC. There are several ways to get there. We are pretty easily accessible by car or metro. It is DC, so given the time of day or day of the week, the drive time could be wildly different, but without traffic, it's 15 to 20 minutes. It could be anywhere from 15 minutes to 40 minutes, and there is free parking at the MSC. We're about a half mile from the closest metro station on the Green Line, and then another option, there also is an employee shuttle that runs throughout the day between the Natural History Museum downtown and our facility. All visitors are welcome to use this shuttle. Just because it's an employee shuttle primarily, we do ask that you let us know ahead of time so that we can get a pass for you, but it's no problem as long as we have a day or two's advance notice that you are going to utilize this option. Okay, so how to make an appointment. These slides are going to be available for everybody at some point after we're done, and so you'll have these links. But this here is a link directly to our online appointment form, but I'll also show you guys how to navigate there from our homepage. So on the Natural History's website, under Anthropology, and then there's a button for us on the Anthropology main page too, but we're under Collections Overview and then Anthropology Archives. There's actually several ways to get to the forum, but this is one of the simplest ways. You can go from our homepage and just click Request a Research Appointment. Quickly point out, I think Melissa distributed a copy of our search guide to everybody before this webinar, but you can also find a copy of the same thing online and contact information if you need it, but that's also in the PowerPoint. Okay, so this is our appointment request form. This is a shared form for all archival and artifact collections in the anthropology department at the Natural History Museum. And so,
Hey, Catherine.
yeah.
Are you showing the form on your screen?
Oh yeah, can you guys not see it?
No, we're just seeing the PowerPoint slide. If you just minimize the slide, maybe it's, there we go.
Okay, can everybody see the website now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I showed you the homepage. It's not that exciting. It's pretty easily navigable. Okay, so this is our appointment request form. I'll kind of quickly go through the fields with you. It's pretty straightforward. So some of the fields are required and some are not. They should be marked with red, although position job title is not required. So it's a little, there should be a star next to anything that is required for you to move forward. One kind of little weirdsie about the form is if you miss one of the required fields, it won't always give you an error when you try to submit it. It'll just take you back to this page. So if it's not going through, take a look back through, because you probably, you know, accidentally missed one of the required fields. It happens all the time. Okay, so just sort of basic, who you are. Affiliation, you can put none, but that is one of the forms, and I'll talk about building security in a little bit, but that is one of the pieces of information that we need in order to get you a building pass for our facility. So you can answer none, but if you have an affiliation with, you know, your workplace or university or your tribe, or if you just would rather not share, you can say none. And then some very basic contact information. We ask for city and state because we do keep track of sort of generally statistics on all of our visitors. That is something that the Smithsonian asks that we report at the end of the year, where our visitors are coming from, sort of generally. Obviously contact information so we can talk to you. This question is totally optional, but it is very helpful for us, and you can click as many options as you want. This, you know, we like to get a sense of who is coming to visit, and this kind of information tells us a lot about who our researchers are and how, you know, when we're planning for the future, the kinds of things that, you know, maybe we can focus on to help who our researchers are. This kind of information, we've had this sort of question on our appointment form for many years, and that's how we're able to say statistically that we know one of our two largest demographic groups is Native community researchers. And so, you know, we can say that with confidence and use that information to prioritize those researchers in whatever ways we can and help you guys. So like I mentioned before, this is a shared form. So this question is especially important. You can check multiple options, but who you check tells the form where to send a notification about your appointment request so that we can get back to you and confirm your appointment. It should be pretty straightforward about what kinds of things you want to see. So the first three options are for the NAA. Video obviously is the film archives. And then if you're interested in really any kind of cultural object collections or archaeological collections, you would click this option, and then biological anthropology, so any kind of skeletal remains or anything like that, you would check this box. There's something else I was going to say. Oh, you're welcome to check multiple different options, and you can visit multiple different departments in the same visit and even in the same day. We're all in the same building for the most part and just down the hall from each other. People pretty regularly visit lots of different types of collections in the anthropology department when they're doing research. So the next two questions are very helpful for us in scheduling your appointment. Just what collections you want to look at and sort of broadly what your project is. If you want to get into a lot of detail, we love that, but don't feel like you have to. But the more we know about what you want to see and what kind of questions you're trying to answer, the more we can help you. It's helpful to know specific collections. Some of our collections are stored off-site, and so we need to know ahead of time that you want to look at them so we can retrieve them for you. But also, if you can tell us a little bit about your project, maybe there's materials that we can suggest that you might not be able to find on your own, or connections, that we know about, and things we can suggest for you that, maybe you wouldn't have thought of or found online. Then obviously when you want to visit, very important information. And then we ask if anybody is visiting with you. And if they are, if you can put a name so that we know you're coming together, but we do require a separate form for every adult visiting the archives. So we, down here at the bottom are some additional information that you can look at, and it goes over it a little bit more in detail in the anthropology visitor policy and the archives visitor policy. This is for artifact collections. It's mostly the same as ours, but a little bit different. So we don't allow children in the archives. I think our cutoff age is 14, but and that's obviously accompanied by an adult, but under a certain age we just unfortunately can't allow them into the collection space or into the research room, just as a kind of preservation issue. And then if you'd like to get a copy of your form, you can check this. And then let's go back to the PowerPoint. So we should be back at the PowerPoint now. If we're not, somebody shout out. Okay, what to expect when you get here, building security. So we are well aware, and we try to acknowledge whenever possible. We know that our building security protocols can oftentimes feel very uncomfortable or unwelcoming, especially for Native visitors. It can bring up some historical traumas, but unfortunately, our building policies are Smithsonian-wide visitor policies, and so we can't change them. But hopefully, by knowing what to expect, it can improve the experience as much as possible, just so it's not quite as overwhelming when you first get here. It can be a little imposing at first. So when you first arrive at the MSC, the Museum Support Center, when you come in, there's going to be a security desk, front desk, right at the entrance with a member of our security staff there. You'll check in with them. They ask that you have some kind of photo ID. Driver's license is great, but it could be any kind of official photo ID. Like I said before, any person visiting our facility that's not Smithsonian staff we have to notify security staff ahead of time. So we fill out a very basic form with your name and contact information and affiliation if you have it, and exactly which days you're going to be coming. So they will be expecting you, and you just check in with them. One thing that you'll be asked to do at the security desk, and this is something that even Smithsonian staff have to do when they come in the building, is to register any large electronics that you bring with you, which you're welcome to bring with you. So that includes laptops, any kind of camera equipment, tablets, not cell phones or anything like that, but anything bigger than a tablet or more complicated needs to be registered. And when I say registered, it's pretty low key. Basically, there's a notebook and you write down what you're bringing in with you. and then you know, make a note when you leave. And like I said, this is something that even staff have to do when they're bringing personal electronics in and out of the building. Because when you leave the building, your bags get searched. Also, a little more low-key than it sounds. It's not like the airport, just when you walk by, the security guard will ask you to open any bags that you have. They'll look in and say, okay, great, have a nice day. And then, so there's a second door when you pass by the security desk that you have to badge into. And so if you've never been to the archives before, the security guard will call us and we'll come down and meet you and show you where we are. If you have been to visit us before and you know where you're going, they'll call us and let us know you're here, and then you can just head on back and we'll be waiting for you in the reading room. Our building is quite large, but relatively easy to navigate. It's one long hallway with things coming off of it. So, you know, once you've been here once or twice, it's pretty easy to figure out. Some logistics to expect. There is free Wi-Fi available throughout the building. It's okay. It's pretty good in the research room. It's not 100% reliable. There are Ethernet ports on all of the tables in the research room, and I keep an Ethernet cable at my desk just in case someone needs it. So, but I've never had to use it before. Because of the building's pest policy, we can't allow food to be consumed in the research room or any of the collection spaces. But we do have a cafeteria on site, and food is available for purchase. Their hours used to be 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., but of course I can't guarantee that's exactly what it's going to be when we're able to reopen, but sort of generally breakfast and lunch. But the cafeteria space is open all day, even when the cafe is not selling food and beverages. And so you're welcome to go out there at any point to have a snack or drink some coffee or just to take a break. We also have a refrigerator and microwaves available for visitors to use. So if you wanted to bring your own food, that's totally fine. We have places for you to store it and heat it up when you're ready for lunch. You know, since generally researchers are here all day. So when you get to the research room, I have a couple slides here of our research room protocols. A lot of our, you know, the way we do things is going to be very familiar if you've ever done research in an archives before. I don't think we have any rules that are too quirky or specific to us. When you first arrive, we'll do a quick orientation, show you where everything is in the room, where everything is that you might need. We'll do an orientation on handling archival materials and go over the forms that we'll ask you to fill out. Again, none of this is going to be surprising or unique if you've ever done research in an archives, and if you haven't, it's not too much. A lot of it's pretty common sense. And so what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So one of the forms that we'll ask you to fill out is our visitor agreement form. This, you know, we'll go over the rules of the reading room and how to request materials and how to handle them. And then we have a form that fills them all out and you sign it and agree to that, basically. We also have a form for if you want to take pictures of materials, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And again, it's, you know, it's nothing too intense. And so just some things, kind of a heads up that we can't allow at the table while you're doing research. No food or drink. If you want to have a bottle of water over with your stuff and go walk over there and drink it and then come back, that's obviously fine, but we can't allow food or drink at the table with the materials. No pens, pencils only. Personal items are going to have to be left over on the side of the room. But anything that you need to do your work, you can bring to the table with you, basically. So we don't allow scanners for researcher use in the room, and that includes The handheld kind that you wave, and also any kind of portable tabletop scanner we can't allow. Tripods I'll come back to in a second. We have a sort of situational policy on tripods, but I'll come back to that in a second when we talk about photos, which you are definitely allowed to photograph material while you're doing research. In fact, we encourage it. It's one of the best and quickest ways to get research copies of material. We do have a couple rules, which, you know, probably make sense. No flash. We have a form for you to fill out talking about these rules that you sign and agree that we talked about copyright issues with you. Basically, if you want to publish the images that you take, just talk to us first. It's probably going to be okay, but at that point in the process, we can talk to you if there's any copyright concerns you should be aware of, or just so you can tell us what you're going to publish, because we like to track publication usage. And then if you're going to take photos and you want to use a tripod, we don't ever allow tabletop tripods that sit on the table. There's just too much risk of damaging documents. We can allow larger tripods that stay on the floor, but that is something that we have to decide day by day. It really depends on how many people are in the room, because it's a space issue. We don't have a large reading room, and so if there aren't very many people there and we can sort of comfortably put you at the back table where your tripod's not going to be in the way and everybody can move around the room safely, then it's fine. But if we're full up, you know, we have 6 people in the room and everybody has their own cart, then it's probably not going to be possible, but it's definitely a sort of day-by-day decision that we have to make. So we, at the Museum Support Center in our building, we have a private ceremonial space that is available to visitors to use at any point in your visit. It's near the collection storage area, and if you're interested in using it, just let us know when you get there and we can show you where it is. In the past, visitors have used this space for individual and group prayer, ceremonies like smudging or blessings, just group discussion, or even just kind of resting breaks during the day. The room has special ventilation, so you're welcome to do any kind of smudging or smoke cleansing that you'd like to do. We have a supply cabinet in the ceremonial space that we stock with a variety of ceremonial supplies and tools. Unfortunately, because of the building pest policy, we generally can't allow people to bring in their own natural materials to use, but we have a wide variety of things, you know, different kinds of sage, for example, that people might want to use. If there is something, if you know for sure that you're going to want to use the ceremonial space during your visit, and there's some kind of specific material that you know you're going to want to use, just let us know ahead of time and we can figure out the best way to make sure that we have that on hand for you. You know, it depends on the item, but we've definitely made that work in the past for visitors. So we're very, oh, we also have an outdoor ceremonial space, but it's a nice space out in our front garden. So been talking about visiting, and you might be thinking, well, I live in California or Minnesota, and Washington, D.C. is very far away, and I can afford to just pop out there, which is fair. So we wanted to point out some Smithsonian provided funding options for visiting the Smithsonian to view collections. The first program, and one of my personal favorite Smithsonian programs, is Recovering Voices. Some of you have probably heard of Recovering Voices, or RV, as I'll probably refer to them through the rest of this. So they are a collaborative program between the National Museum of Natural History, the National Museum of the American Indian, and the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, also the Smithsonian. And we partner with communities around the world to help support language revitalization and traditional knowledge revitalization programs. There's sort of 3 main arms of Recovering Voices. They're public outreach programs that generally take place at the museums in DC, but sometimes around the country. Interdisciplinary research that happens, sort of sponsored by Recovering Voices, and then the community collaboration projects that they do. And the project that we wanted to point out as relevant in this situation is their community research program. So Recovering Voices is able to provide funding and logistical support to a handful of group visits to the Smithsonian every year, normally. Of course, this year, the pandemic has kind of thrown a wrench in the works, and I know that they're piloting a new Recovering RV at Home Recovering Voices program. And so more information is probably coming on that later, but I have a link to their website down at the bottom here that has more information and contact info for Recovering Voices. The applications are generally due in September for the following year, and on their website will be contact information for Recovering Voices staff, and if you want to put in the chat, we can give you contact info for some specific people. I'm going to name drop Emily Kane, who is a coordinator for the program right now, and I know that she has said in the past and that if you are applying for the community research program and you want to send her your application ahead of time to look over it and ask questions and have some help, she is happy to do that at any point. So if you ever have any questions, please reach out to them or us. And then just some other funding options I wanted to point out. The Smithsonian does sponsor a Native American Fellowship program, and there's sort of two main awards as part of that program. They are largely the same in terms of eligibility. If you are a Native person interested in pursuing a project using Native collections at the Smithsonian, you're welcome to apply. The main difference between the two awards being that the Community Scholars Award is open to any member of the community. And as you probably have guessed, the Visiting Student Awards are specifically for graduate students interested in doing the same kind of projects. And I have links here to these two on the slide. Okay, so now we're gonna dig into searching online. So it's always a good idea before visiting any archives, not just us, to do a little bit of searching on your own in their catalog. We, of course, would be happy to help suggest collections based on your project and help you find things in our catalog, because as you'll see, it can be a little overwhelming sometimes. And based on the figures that Gina gave, you can tell we have a lot of material on a variety of topics and time periods. Well, a variety of topics that have to do with anthropology. But it's always a good idea to do some of your own searching and browsing before visiting, get a sense of what we have and what you're interested in, how you want to prioritize your time. So at the Smithsonian, for archival material, there's sort of two main online catalog platforms. So there's the Smithsonian Online Virtual Archives, or SOVA, and this is just sova.si.edu. So this platform searches all archival material at the Smithsonian among all 14 archives, but it only searches archival material. And there's also the Collections Search Center, which is collections.si.edu. And this platform searches all collections at Smithsonian, everything from all the archives, all the museum artifact collections, all of the libraries, some of the magazine archived articles. So this one can definitely be overwhelming in terms of search results. It searches everything. So first we're going to take a look at SOVA, and it should have gone to the browser. Somebody chime in if you're not seeing the website right now. So SOVA, the homepage, it's a pretty straightforward search platform, and I'll kind of show you guys a little tour how to navigate. So if you scroll down, you can browse based on these sort of very general topics like women's history or civil rights. You also can browse based on repository, and you can see all of the archives at the Smithsonian listed out here. And then there's a couple search bars. So at any point in your search, you can start a new one up at the top that stays there. There's also a tutorial on SOVA's website. So if you forget anything I said, and also a lot of the things I'm gonna go over are in the search guide that we provided for everybody. But I do wanna, and I'm gonna say this again later, but at any point, even if you're not planning a specific visit, if you have any questions about using any of these search platforms or finding any materials, please reach out. We'd be happy to help anytime, because it definitely can be a little confusing. Like if you're having trouble finding stuff, it's probably not you, it's the website. So first, let's just take a look. Let's go to a collection. So when you search, this is what your search page looks like. You can filter your results based on a couple different categories. Archival repository is a very useful one, especially if you are doing research in preparation for a visit. Obviously, you know which archives you're physically going to be visiting, so you can limit your results to only things there. Some of these other fields are very helpful, but maybe less reliable. And this will apply for the other search platform too. So all of these other fields, you know, if you filter your results based on topic or type of material, it's not necessarily going to be every item that contains interviews. It's going to be every record that put the word interview in the type field, which for a lot of these you can assume. I mean, archival materials is not very helpful because everything is archival materials on this website, but so your search results you have here, and it'll show you a little preview of what you're going to look at, so you can sort of decide what's going to be helpful. You can also sort up here based on, so right now we're looking at records for whole collections. You can look at all results, which will include, you know, folder titles within a collection, or, you know, a section of a collection. You can also sort it so that you only see digital objects. And if you check this box here, it'll show you records in one of these categories that has some kind of digital object attached to it. And that would be digitized content that you can view online. So let's use Frederica de Laguna as an example. That's one of our collections. So when you click on the collection, you're going to see, these are our finding aids. You're going to start on the overview page, and it'll show you just some very general information about the collection, the name, some information about what's in the collection, the types of things that you might find in this collection, some information about the person whose papers these are. This is all pretty standard information that we'd include. If there are restrictions, that would be noted on this page. If you want to view this information as a PDF, you just click print PDF and it'll open it up for you. The contents tab here will take you to a more detailed listing of the contents of the collection. There isn't always going to be a more detailed listing for our collections, but it's going to be true for most things. So then you can just scroll here, or you can navigate on the sidebar here by the different sections that the collection's been organized into. A lot of them are going to have subsections, and you can just click at any of these points to view that part. And so one thing I will point out, the way that SOVA works, because finding aids tend to be quite large for Smithsonian collections, this page is an asynchronous loading, which means not all of the information is going to load at once, because you would just be stuck with 5 minutes of spinning circles. And so if you want to use the Control or Command F find in page feature, it's not going to necessarily work here because, you know, what you can't see on the page hasn't been loaded yet. So if you want to use that to keyword search through the contents of a collection, your best option is to click print PDF and open up the PDF version, and then you can Control F to your heart's desire. Another thing to point out when you're on SOVA is this little icon here. This little blue box means that there is digitized content in that collection or part of the collection somewhere. You know, so this means the contents of the collection has been digitized. You can view the actual pages or listen to the sound recording. And so it looks like, you know, so when you look on the side here, you can see, oh, so the field research notes have been digitized and some of the sound recordings. And if we expand this, we can see which sound recordings have been digitized. So if we go to this page, you know, we can see which ones have and have not. So if you click on the folder titles here, and this is true for all of them, it'll open up a page with some more information if there is more information available about that item or folder. And then if you want to listen to either of these sound recordings, you could just click it and it'll open up a new page with the recording. And I think you can, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, yeah, I think you can download sound recordings from here, but if you can't figure it out, just send us an email, or if it's not working. But textual material and photos that have been digitized, when you click to open and view them, there should be a way to download copies for yourself. So anything that is online, you're welcome to save a research copy. But again, we'll ask if you want to publish images, to reach out to us just so we can give you any copyright information if there is some, and make a record of the publication, just because we like to track those sorts of statistics. Let's go back. So now Collection Search Center. There we go. All right, so Collection Search Center, like I said before, searches everything, and it reminds you of this here. So you can search over 16 million records in all of the Smithsonian. So there is a lot, and when you search in Collection Search Center, your results are going to be a little bit overwhelming. But when you're looking for NAA materials, I would recommend starting in Collection Search Center. SOVA only has archival materials, but more specifically, if you're familiar with, you know, archival programs, SOVA only has records for materials that have been cataloged using a back-end program called ArchiveSpace. The Smithsonian just switched to ArchiveSpace a few years ago, and so some of the archives at the Smithsonian, us included, are still working on moving our records into ArchiveSpace, and so not everything that we have is going to necessarily show up in SOVA. A lot of it will, and every day there's more, because we have a staff person working on that right now. So every day there's more in SOVA, and eventually all of it will be in SOVA, but we are sort of still in the process, and several archives at Smithsonian are still working on putting things into SOVA. So the best place to start, where you will find a record, some kind of record for everything at the NAA that is available for research, on Collection Search Center. And I'll show you in a minute how the two systems really are connected. So you can start here and end up on SOVA, and it will be fine. So let's search for a community. So this is what your very basic search results page is going to look like on Collection Search. And because, as you can see here, when you search for, you know, any materials related to the Dene people, Navajo is probably going to be your best keyword option. You get 22,244 documents on 500 pages of results. Oh, more than 500 pages, because the result pages have been truncated to only 500 pages. So that's a lot of stuff. And as you can kind of see glancing here, it's from many different places and many different kinds of things. Some of them are objects, some of them are images. And so one of the best things you can do, and you're probably going to have to do when you're using collection search, is to filter your search results. So there are a couple different options here on the sidebar to do that. So there's the narrow by section, and then there's search options. So search options are very useful for some things. It's a little bit more technical in terms of the way it filters the search results. I think this option is very useful if you're looking for, if you're looking for photographs, let's say, and you specifically want photographs, you can see the image online because it's been digitized. This is a pretty foolproof way of getting that, once you've worked out your other filters and your keyword searches, and it'll give you only results with media attached. So that's any kind of media, but finding aids, pictures, sound recordings, but it's a pretty useful filter there. And then the ones that you're probably going to use a lot are these narrow by filters. So some things to note as I show you these filters, they do stack, so you can add multiple filters at once. And they all apply in a sort of and fashion, not or. So if you choose one of these type options and also one of these topic options, it'll only show you results that meet both of those categories. So one of the types of filters that's going to be most useful, because it right off the bat cuts out a lot of results, is this catalog record source. So if you're interested in specifically NAA materials, we're right here, National Anthropological Archives. If you're interested in object and artifact collections in the anthropology department at the Natural History Museum, it's NMNH Anthropology, like here. And then for NMAI, the American Indian Museum, if you're interested in either archival or objects, they both were going to be categorized here under National Museum of the American Indian. So for our purposes, I'm going to click NAA. And you can see up here at the top in red which filters you've applied to your searches, and you can remove any of them just by clicking the little X here at any point. And so we'll kind of take a look at some of these other filters. So you can sort by types of online media if you're just looking for pictures, or you're looking for something that definitely has a finding aid attached. If you're looking, for photographs or artwork or, field notes, you can filter by culture or language. But just like on SOVA, and it's probably more relevant even here on collection search, one thing to remember about these filters is that they're not necessarily comprehensive. So they are really good at limiting search results if you have just too many results. But sometimes you might be taking things out of your results page that would have been relevant for what you're looking for. So you just have to be careful, because the way these work is, and type is a great example of this, that, if you clicked on works of art here, it's not going to limit you to Navajo material at the NAA that's all artwork. It's only going to show you things that have exactly works of art in the type field. So we probably all agree that drawings are a kind of work of art, but a single record for an artwork might not have works of art and drawings in that field. And so depending on which one you click, it might be filtering it out when that was exactly what you were looking for. So you just have to be sort of careful and sometimes do multiple different searches with different filters. And one thing I do want to mention, if anybody's familiar with Boolean search terms, that does apply on collection search. It should work. So if you want to do ands and ors and asterisks, searches, that should all work the way that you expect it to. Sometimes it's a little weird, but for the most part, it should work the way you want it to. And so let's take a little look at what we can see here when we get our search results. So we'll go with this one. So when, as you can see here, in your search results, you have a little bit of information that it shows you, some very basic kind of info about the thing that is showing here. And one of the sort of confusing things about collection search is that on your search results page, it's going to include records of all different types and sort of hierarchical levels within collections at with the exact same sort of importance on this page. So some of these records are entire collections. Some of these records are for an individual folder in a collection. Some of these records are going to be, you know, a section of a collection or an individual item that's part of a larger collection. And that's not necessarily apparent from this page, but there are ways of figuring that out, and I'll show you how to do that now. So you click this caret or this expand button here. It's going to expand and give you some more information. So that is helpful if you don't want to, you know, go to the whole page. You can decide if something is relevant. When you click the caret to expand, it's going to show you a lot more information, but it's not necessarily going to show you everything. So if you click on the icon or photo here or view full record, it'll take you to the page to view the full online catalog record, which has every piece of information that is part of this record, which, as you can see, sometimes is a lot. It's, you know, it's going to be the kinds of things you expect, who collected these materials, publishers that are included. This is the Eugene O. Leonard photograph collection. You can see some agencies or people or organizations that are included here. It'll show you what types of materials and how many of them, if we have that information. Often we'll have cultures listed, but I'll say that this section isn't necessarily comprehensive. You know, and probably a clue to that is that we often include these more general kind of, you know, any communities in the Southwest and any Native community in the Great Basin could potentially, or Plateau could potentially be included here, but we know for sure that there should be things related to Hopi or Nez Perce, for example. And then some more information on here. Some very important fields to make note of for the NAA. This citation field is really helpful. Obviously, if you need to cite things, you can literally just copy and paste this and use that in your article or whatever. This local call number can also be useful. So if this were a record for an individual photo and you scroll down here to citation, it would say something. It would have a number for that photo, probably an inventory number, but it would also say, you know, Eugene O. Leonard photograph collection, or, you know, photo lot 92-3. And that's usually the clue. That's how you figure out if something is part of a larger collection. And the citation field is really helpful for that. Most records on collection search are going to have a button here for record link and view finding aids, so that these both will take you to the same place. So if there is a SOVA record for the material, when you click that, it's going to push you out to the SOVA record, which will have all of the same information that's on collection search, just in a slightly different order and format. And you know, when something is digitized, generally you can find those materials on either page. So as you can see, you know, you could click here or scroll down to this section and click here to get to the slideshow, or you can just go here and if it will load, there we go. It takes us to the slideshow of these beautiful photos. And you can get back to the SOVA finding in here. If you want to download a PDF of all of these photos, you can do that here. You also, from the slideshow, should be able to save copies of individual photos. This is all going to be lower resolution copies, but if you need higher resolution of something that you can see online, just reach out to us and we can help you out with that. Because obviously, generally you're looking at it, that usually means it's been digitized, so it's a pretty simple kind of request for us. Just let us know. Let me make sure I have not skipped over anything. There's definitely some other quirks about collection search in SOVA that you probably will encounter when you're searching. I've talked about some of them, but I haven't mentioned all of them because it can be a little overwhelming to kind of info dump about it all at once. But I do just want to reiterate that I and other NAA staff are eager to help you search online. And if you're having trouble, especially with collection search, it 90% of the time is not you. It's because it's a little weird and it's not super intuitive. And part of the reason that is because it was built to serve as a search function for many, many different repositories at the Smithsonian, and all of our collections are very different, and the information that we collect about them is largely the same, but not quite the same. So to make one system that works for everybody is a little tough. And so it doesn't quite work all the time for everybody. But there are definitely quirks and there's ways to work around them, and we have been doing it for years and we know how to do it. So please reach out if you have any questions, especially about searching. We are happy to help. A quick note before Daisy gets into fully digitization. We normally, when we're in the office and it's not the middle of a global pandemic, we are able to make a limited amount of research copies for people from remote requests, or if you're in the room and you don't have time and you want us to do it after you leave, we can sometimes do this. Our capacity for this and you know, how many pages in an order we can do, or how fast or not fast at all the turnaround time is going to be for that kind of request, varies throughout the year because it's almost entirely dependent on staff time. You know, so for example, if we have a volunteer coming in once a week who can help with this, those things get pushed out much faster than, you know, when we're busy and we don't.
Can you explain the difference between research copy and what Daisy's going to talk about?
Oh yeah, definitely. So what I'm talking about here, and we semantically, we differentiate between like copies and, you know, digitization, reproductions. The main difference is the resolution of the images that you're going to get. So when we do research copies, generally you're going to get a PDF at a lower resolution. It's high enough quality to read, certainly. It's not high enough quality to publish those images, but it's definitely high enough quality to use, to refer back to for your research. And then what Daisy is going to talk about is if you need high resolution TIFF files, or, you know, I think MP4s for sound recordings. I don't know, she'll correct me. But, you know, if you need high resolution files for publication or something like that, then that's what Daisy's going to talk about. And that is a little more involved. And there is a fee associated with both of these services. For copy requests, it's pretty nominal, and sometimes we can waive it all together. And if you want less than 20 pages, then we'll just do it for free when we have time. You know, but it's like, I think our fee is 50 cents a page, and we have a cap on how much we'll charge you. So, you know, and, you know, we can discount it. It's all sort of, it's pretty nominal fee just to pay for the time, the labor time of somebody scanning on a copier for you. So I think that's it for me. Ready for Daisy? I'm gonna.
Catherine, you're going to advance the slides for me?
Yeah, I can.
Just leave it there for now. It's fine. Hello, everybody. My name is Daisy Njoku, and I am the media archivist for the Anthropology Archives. I should say up front that I am not a digitization specialist. I'm not a photographer. I I basically am a glorified asset manager and do a lot of things to do with rights and reproductions. But if you have any technical questions about digitization, I probably know just enough to get myself into trouble. But I could at least point you maybe to someone who would have more of that information about that. And so, feel free to ask. I'm not sure I'm going to give you the right answer, but I can give you an answer. Let's put it that way.
Can I just also say that Daisy usually underestimates herself, or underrepresents herself, I should say.
Yeah, but not this time, Gina.
Oh, all right.
Okay, so you can go on to the next slide, doesn't matter. The archives digitize everything, 2D material, manuscripts, artwork, photographs. We digitize sound recordings, various kinds. We digitize film. Well, we digitize videotape, audio tape, you name it. Some of the stuff we try to do in-house, and some of the stuff we have to send that to an outside vendor because we don't have the expertise or the equipment in-house to do that kind of work. So as you can imagine, we like to digitize, and during this pandemic, there has been a lot of pressure to put out digitized material. And we like to digitize for all very good reasons. As you can see here, it's part of our mission to diffuse knowledge. We reach bigger audiences this way. The public definitely expects everything to be digitized and more stuff to be digitized. We're trying to help with that, but digitizing archival collections is difficult. I don't know if you remember from the Freddie de Laguna finding aid, of that entire finding, and only 2 small portions of that were digitized, and not even everything in those series were digitized. That's a lot of stuff to digitize. Again, it also promotes, we also digitize to promote relationships with communities. And I find that those relationships are really informative. I think the information goes both ways. We get a lot back from source communities, information about the stuff that we have digitized, and then they get copies of them for their own archives. And then, of course, we digitize to reduce handling and increase the access to collections that would probably not be available to you in the research room without special, like without Gina hovering over you, let's say, because of they're so fragile, or they're oversized, or there's a light, there's a light issue or a temperature issue, or film, for instance, is very difficult. We can't screen film in the way that we used to be able to do that in the old days without damaging the actual object. So those are the reasons we digitize. We like to digitize. We want to digitize. The problem is that, you can move on. You can push it on. It's not so easy to digitize, as a lot of people seem to think. It is more than just slapping it on a scanner or clicking around with a camera. There are all these things that we have to consider when we're digitizing. And I'm talking now really about, this is digitizing larger amounts of material than one photograph. We do digitize these one-off things, but these bigger projects, we prefer to digitize the entire photograph collection because it's an issue of scale. And it also, if you have the equipment set up to do the kind of thing that you're going to digitize, you might as well get it all done at the same time. That does sometimes hinder the production of the one photograph. But in the end, I think it's a better way of approaching the digitization problem. So here are all the the things that we have to consider. These are all the questions that we ask when someone says, is this digitized? Can you digitize this? These are the things that these are all the questions that we have to ask ahead of time. And they all have to have an answer or some sort of solution before we can proceed to the next step, which is to actually say, okay, we're going to digitize it, or we're not going to digitize it, or this is how we're going to digitize. This is what we're going to do. This is we start the workflow. Do I have anything else that I wanted to say about this? The main idea, I guess, of why we digitize is we really only want to do it once. There's no point in digitizing. And I have to say, I feel a little bit ambivalent about producing those PDF files that Catherine was talking about, because if you're going to digitize something and you're going to put the object at risk to make the copy, you really should do it really well and right the first time. It saves you a whole lot of hassle in the long run. But given that we can't do that kind of level of digitization for everything, we have this stopgap measure of the PDFs. And I will say, I don't know if Catherine said it or not, there's some things that we just can't copy as a make a PDF for you. We may not be able to do that because of fragile handling or a light sensitivity or another reason. Did you talk about that, Catherine? I can't even remember. I don't think you did, actually, right? So then, okay, you can move on. So then we have to, once we've decided that this is how we're going to move forward, these are all the other things that we have to deal with when we're talking about digitization. And the bottom line is time and money. And that is something that the archives is very short on almost all the time. We do get sometimes a lot of money, but often there's no time to do it, or a staff member has to be delegated to do that kind of work, and then the staff member cannot do the other work. So it's a whole amount of sort of work shuffling that goes on. So yeah, that's the situation. I don't want to sound really negative about it because it's something that we're very positive and we'll want to encourage. I just wanted to make it aware that it's a little bit more difficult than it seems like at the beginning when you say, oh, we can just digitize that. Well, there's a lot of things that have to happen before you can just digitize it. And I should say that in the current situation, there's no digitizing that's going on whatsoever. No new digitization is going on, at least not in the anthropology archives. However, you can move on to the next slide. We can give you access to existing digital files, and those are fulfilled as we can do it. And there's a form that we ask you to fill out for tracking purposes. Again, you use all the things that you just learned from Catherine, the citation field, and what you're going to use it for. And that's not so much we're never going to say no, you can't use it. It's for us to sort of track the kinds of different ways that people are using the material. It's more of for us, for statistics. And I will say that if we notice that a lot of people are asking for the same photograph, and it's a pretty crappy low res, we could do a better photograph, we might say, oh, this set of photographs is very popular and people keep asking for it. Let's finish off that collection, or let's redo it at a higher resolution so that we have a better image quality. So that's the reason why we take that information. The last thing is, there is a fee for that. We charge a fee for new digitization for sure, none of which is happening right now, but also for providing providing pre-existing image files. And the reason we charge a fee is not so much as a barrier to access, but to keep people from going overboard with their requests. It's a very nominal fee. It's usually $7.50 a TIFF file. And that's just to keep people from saying, I want everything, because we just can't do that. It's make people think a little bit before they order everything. If you don't see an image online, it usually means that it's not digitized or no high-res file exists currently. But as Catherine says, always ask, because there's a bit of a delay between the time something is digitized and the time that it gets linked up to its catalog information online. So it's entirely possible that what you're interested in has been digitized, it's just not viewable online. So ask, always ask. Anyway, that's it. That's all I have, Catherine.
Okay, I was just going to very briefly talk about loans. But before I do that, I just want to reiterate what Daisy said, is that, we want to digitize. We do our very best to get material digitized that we can. It's just that we are, like so many of us in archives, currently understaffed, and we don't have a dedicated person to carry out digital imaging. Therefore, we usually have to contract that. So what we charge is cost recovery, essentially, is what the fees are. All right, so at any rate, loans was a question that we were asked to address. And, loans are something that the archives, we don't do a lot of loaning, primarily because most people want reproductions of a photograph or of a document, since they tend to be quite fragile and light sensitive. It's much easier just to use a reproduction in an exhibit. So we do, but that said, we do loans. We ourselves at the NAA don't actually, we're involved in the loan process, but most of the loan process is carried out by, let's see if I can, can you click on that, Catherine? Is carried out by the anthropology registrar and her team. So they have a process that involves first filling out the preliminary loan request form. And one of the things that's important to note is any loans, they would like the initial request to come at least 18 months prior to the proposed shipping date. So if you have an exhibit that's 2 years off, now would be the time to start that process. So it can be a long process, but all that said, we do loan materials. Mostly what we end up loaning is artwork, sometimes photographs. To my knowledge, we haven't been asked for any documents or manuscript material for exhibit, but we have and do loan artwork and photographs. So bear that in mind, but it is, again, a long process. Part of that is because they generally have a pretty high number of loan requests to work through, but part of it is just the paperwork takes a lot of time, and there needs to be conservation reviews and that kind of thing. So, but I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have about that. And that's pretty much, like I say, we don't do a lot of loans, but we do them. So, and always happy to talk about them. So I think that concludes our structured part of our presentation. So we'd love to hear from you and any questions you may have or anything else you'd like us to talk about further. I think we have a little bit of time.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Gina and Catherine and Daisy. That was a wonderful presentation. So what questions do we have for them?
Was Herman Viola the first director of the NAA?
He was. He was the first director of the NAA.
1968 then?
No, he came on in 1972.
Okay. Yeah, he's one of our consultants in our current IMLS project. Why are scanners not allowed? Whether they're desk scanners or just on your phone, I don't understand why they wouldn't be allowed.
So I'll touch on that. Well, if it's an app on your phone, that's fine, because in terms of the physicality of it, that is more just you're taking a picture. The reason we don't allow scanners is the same reason we don't allow tabletop tripods, because there's just a preservation risk, especially the ones that you like wave over the documents, and sometimes they want you to like slide it across the paper, and that's just so we've had to just do kind of a blanket no scanner policy. And then the reason for no tabletop scanners, it's partly like a desk space issue, but it's also like a reproductions issue, because we do try to exercise an amount of control over high resolution reproductions that are being
Also an
created.
extra handling issue. You've got to
Yeah.
move the thing
Yeah,
up.
there's more handling than just like flipping through a folder. It's, you know, putting on the thing, and then the light sensitivity is an issue, and it's easier from a liability and preservation perspective if we just are doing that instead of researchers.
Okay. And then you said no digitization is going on now. Wouldn't this be a good time to do a lot of that? You know, without so many in-person requests?
It would, but most of us are not allowed in the building still, so we can't digitize anything. We're all working from home except for essential staff and plus a few extra who are like checking on collections.
Okay.
Great. So any other questions?
I have a question.
Whoa.
Sorry, I have other speakers on. I just turned it down. So hi, Catherine, Daisy.
Hi.
I met you back in February when we visited from Chiclo Native Village. And my question was, as Catherine remembers, obviously, we had interest in the Federica de Laguna collection. And majority of the materials that we were trying to get a hold of, to get digital surrogates of, were things that have not been scanned. When we were visiting at the time, I know there was, it was uncertain whether her materials were going to get digitized. And I do know a portion of them are restricted, but the things that we wanted were not restricted. And then you had mentioned that there was a project with another tribal nation that actually came in and did the digitization of their materials themselves. Have you guys explored any additional future projects where tribes like ours can come in and digitize our own materials? An example would be, I know Daisy was saying that the limitations are so we don't get everything. But in regards to Federica's collection, I mean, we identified over 250 documents that we wanted. And we didn't even go through all of her boxes because we didn't have time. We were only there for 4 days. So I think I would be interested to know if you guys have considered that some of these collections hold a lot. Federica's collection had genealogical records that are really important to our tribe and to our people. So what kind of opportunities have you guys started considering in reaching out to tribes to allow them to digitize their own cultural materials?
It's an interesting, well, that's really interesting. When you came in, when we talked about this is something that I think is a really good idea, and I would love to be able to make that work. The people that came in and did it on their own, they came in as researchers, and they worked within the sort of confines of the researcher. They were, you know, they adhered to all the rules. They used the, you know, all the right tripod on the floor. And that is always possible. That kind of work is always possible. But if you're thinking about, and I was thinking about perhaps setting up in a digitization lab something that could be done on a more, on a larger scale, sort of where you guys would just be in the room working, doing your thing, not as researchers. And I think this is, I would love to make this work somehow, but it's a lot more complicated because you have to have someone, you can't be alone with the collect. I mean, there's all these reasons that it would be difficult, but it's a really good idea. And I think it's something that we should be working on. trying to get that to work when we could get back in. But you are always welcome to come in and do it the way the Cherokee did. And just,
Yeah, if you want to bring a very expensive DSLR camera and your tripod setup and, you know, have a little, they had like 3 people, I think, came in, and they had a little system where like one person was clicking and the other person was moving pages. And if you want to do that you're always welcome to.
they also did a lot of testing ahead of time.
Yeah, they had they spent like a whole afternoon just testing the focus and the lighting and the
Right.
placement and
And
where,
they
which
produced
table
some
they
very
wanted to
good
be.
quality images.
Did you allow them to bring in additional lighting? Because the lighting in your guys' room, it's okay, but it's
Yeah,
not
it's okay.
to get really good shots of things. Because I took just research type of photos of some things, and they're not really great to be shared on, you know, so how did they work that out?
You know, that is something that we need to talk to the building about, because I mean, you're not the first person who said that. The lighting in that room could be improved for sure.
I don't think they did not use extra lights.
Yeah, I don't think they brought anything personally. Like as long as I'm in charge of the reading room, it would be the same kind of question as the tripod. Like if we're not busy and we can put you at the back table and it, you know, there's no issue of people trying to walk around you, then if you wanted to have like a light,
It would be
standing on the floor and you wanted to bring in those like reflectors that photographers use, I would be fine with that as long as it was.
well, it would be up to the conservator, I think.
Oh yeah, I guess that's probably true. But we could set up a meeting with a conservator and figure it out. That is certainly possible if that's something you guys would want to pursue in the future.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
I see there's a question about DPO. Oh, it's a private question, but can I answer it? Sorry, Tessa. Can I answer this question? It's a good question. The Smithsonian has a office called the Digital, I can't remember what Digital Program Office. It serves the entire Smithsonian, and you have to get on their docket to have a project done. And we are trying to get on their docket, but it is difficult to get there because we're competing with everybody else in the Smithsonian. And their contractors, they do have a stable of contractors that we can use. The problem with using contractors is that involves shipping collections offsite, which has another layer of wrinkle, another layer of problems that we have to deal with. DPO can do it, they can do it within their own contracting situation, but whether we have the authority to allow contractors to take stuff offsite, I don't know. But yes, we are working. We're trying to get DPO interested and involved with our collections for digitizing.
All right, that was great. What other questions do we have? Nothing? All right, well, if there are no other questions, then I will just look forward to seeing everyone next Wednesday. And thank you again, Gina and Catherine and Daisy. It was a very informative session, and there will be a copy of the webinar on our website, as well as the resource packet they provided us and a PDF copy of the presentation. So I look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday. Have a great rest of the week.
Everyone, and don't forget to
Which
just reach out
program
to
is
us.
next week?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I was just saying, is it the first of the virtual tours next week?
Yes, actually, next week would be the Chickasaw Nation, the first virtual tour.
Okay, because some of the people on our work team and advisory committee will probably be attending, and I need to let them know probably right away.
Yeah, you're always welcome to share the invites that I send out to anyone on your committees or within your communities that you think would be interested.
Just a matter of forwarding the email.
Yes, and and obviously we're going to record that one as well, so you can always share it with them after.
Sure. Thank you.
No problem. All right, well, everyone have a great rest of the week, and I will see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.